Raymond Harper felt the weight of the room before anyone said a word. It was the kind of atmosphere only a certain type of tech office could create, an open-plan battlefield disguised as creativity. 48 desks arranged in a grid, cold brew taps glittering like trophies of sleeplessness. Company swag everywhere. Neon sign on the exposed brick wall reading, "Move fast or move out." He stood at the entrance with his old leather briefcase hanging from his hand, a familiar companion from a career that spanned 4 decades before the cloud. Before smartphones, before every 20-year-old in a hoodie thought they were the second coming of Steve Jobs. Most of the developers didn't even look up. Just a passing glance quick enough to confirm their suspicion. Too old, too slow, wrong era. But one person did notice. "Hey," said a voice dripping with smug confidence. "You must be Ray." The new team lead Trevor Malone didn't stand to greet him. He just spun lazily in his $1,200 Herman Miller chair, the kind young managers ordered on the company card without thinking twice. He wore a Patagonia vest, AirPods in one ear, and an expression that said he already knew everything he needed to know about the man in front of him. Raymond offered a polite nod. "Yes, Raymond Harper." Trevor smirked at the full name. "Right. Well, welcome to Luminix Systems. We're all about speed here, so let's see if you can keep up." A few snickers bubbled from nearby desks. Ray felt the moment land not as sharp humiliation, but as something quieter, sadder, a familiar wound. He had seen this look before in places far less flashy, manufacturing plants closing their doors. Old colleagues pushed out with a handshake and a cardboard box, engineers told they were legacy employees, a polite way of saying obsolete. His breath came slow and even. He'd learned long ago that reacting emotionally only fed the stereotype. Trevor gestured toward an empty desk shoved in the corner near the supply closet, far from the lively nucleus of the office. "You can set up there. It's temporary, obviously. We're on a 90-day contract. Trial period. Just to see if this arrangement makes sense." Arrangement. Another euphemism for "we don't think you'll last the week." Raymond simply nodded. Understood. He walked across the room, feeling the eyes on his back, not curious, not welcoming, but evaluative. Measuring him. Grading him. Dismissing him. Someone whispered behind him. He brought a briefcase. The reply came with a soft laugh. "Dude probably prints emails." Ray placed his belongings at the desk. The briefcase. A thin stack of printed architecture notes. A black pilot pen. He moved with a quiet precision. A kind of ritual he carried from job to job, decade to decade. It grounded him. But before he could settle, Trevor called out again. "Hey team, daily stand-up in 5. Ray, you should join. Let's see where you fit in." They gathered near the giant whiteboard. Everyone holding sleek MacBooks covered in stickers. Python, Golang, Docker whales, anime characters. Raymond stood among them like a man transported forward in time. He was older than all of their parents, maybe even their grandparents. "All right," Trevor began, clapping loudly. "Welcome to sprint planning. We've got a massive week ahead. We're rewriting the entire backend for the Luminix analytics engine. Deadline is next Friday. No excuses." A murmur of confidence rippled through the group. Raymond listened carefully. An entire back-end rewrite in 1 week? Even calm, methodical teams needed 3, maybe 4. Then Trevor turned toward him with a smirk. "This might feel a little fast-paced for you, Ray, but don't worry. We'll keep you looped in." Somebody coughed to hide a laugh. A girl with blue hair whispered, not quietly enough, "He probably still uses Windows XP." Ray pretended not to hear it. His heartbeat didn't even change. He had lived through the rise and fall of operating systems, languages, architectures, paradigms. He had watched the industry reinvent itself every 5 years, always claiming the old way was useless. But he also knew something they didn't. The foundations never change. People forget that at their own peril. The stand-up continued with updates from each developer. Their jargon was fluent but messy, buzzwords mixed with half-explained logic. They sounded like people who understood pieces of the puzzle, not the entire picture. Then Trevor arrived at him. "So, Ray, we're all curious." He grinned, performing for the room. "Can you even use GitHub?" A ripple of laughter spread. Raymond answered evenly. "I've used version control systems since before Git existed." Trevor raised a brow. "Cute. Well, let's put that experience to the test." He tapped a few keys on his laptop and turned it so Ray and everyone else could see. "This is the module you'll be working on. It's not exactly simple. And we need it clean, optimized, documented, and ready for integration by Friday." A few developers snickered. "That's a lot for a contractor. No way he finishes that." "Dude, I couldn't finish that." Ray studied the screen. Most people would see thousands of lines of chaotic, inconsistent code. He saw something else. A structure trying desperately to emerge. An architecture begging for clarity. A system that could be saved if someone understood it as a whole. Trevor leaned back, arms folded. Well, think you can keep up with us? The challenge felt like a slap disguised as a handshake. Raymond met the team lead's eyes. There was no anger, no fear, just a calm, grounded certainty born from decades of weathering storms fiercer than this. I'll have it done, he said softly. Trevor blinked as if the answer wasn't the one he expected. The room quieted. Ray added, and it will be clean. Somewhere behind him, someone muttered, "Oh, come on." Trevor forced a smile. All right, then. Let's see what you've got. Raymond sat at his corner desk. The room hummed with the sound of keyboards, cold brew dispensers, and Spotify playlists leaking from half-worn AirPods. The younger developers typed with frantic energy, hands moving fast enough to impress anyone who didn't understand that speed meant nothing without direction. Ray, meanwhile, opened his briefcase and gently pulled out a yellow legal pad. He began to write. Not code. Not yet. He mapped the system by handflow arrows, data paths, load points, old habits, beaten into him by years of systems engineering where mistakes cost millions, not likes on Slack. He read their documentation. Then their undocumented code. Then their comments, half jokes, half desperation. By mid-morning, he already spotted 3 critical bottlenecks in their architecture. One of them was so severe that the entire platform could collapse under a sharp spike in traffic. He circled it. He would fix that one last after the module rewrite. They needed to learn something first. At noon, Trevor strolled by holding his cold brew like a trophy. How's it going, Ray? Need help with anything? Login issues? Maybe a tutorial? Ray smiled faintly. I'm all right, thank you. Trevor glanced at the legal pad and chuckled. Man, that's adorable. Notes? On paper? You know we have tools for that. Ray's pen didn't stop moving. Yes, he replied. But my brain works faster with this. Trevor shrugged and walked off. The moment he left, 2 developers passed by, whispering loudly, "He's dead by Wednesday. No shot. He survives the sprint." Ray felt a small ache in his chest, not from their words, but from the memory they triggered. He'd once mentored young engineers who respected him more than family. They hung on to his advice, begged to learn from him. He remembered their eager faces, their late nights debugging together, their celebrations after big launches. Most of them were executives now. Some were CTOs. A few had retired early. But in this office, he was just an old man with a briefcase. Good, he thought. Let them underestimate me, it'll make the ending cleaner. By 3 p.m., Raymond had already outlined the first half of the rewrite. His mind was warm, alive, sharp, working at a level that decades of experience carved into muscle memory. He stood to stretch and headed to the break room. As he approached, he heard voices. Young, careless, unfiltered. Dude, why'd they even hire him? It's a tax thing, watch. They'll fire him in a month. You think he even knows what Kubernetes is? Bro, he said, measure twice, code once earlier. Grandpa wisdom, laughter filled the small kitchen. Ray paused just before entering, letting the noise wash over him. He didn't step inside. He turned back quietly. He had no desire to embarrass them. Not yet. But a thought lingered like a shadow behind his ribs. They think age makes you irrelevant. They have no idea that age is where mastery lives. The next morning, the office buzzed earlier than usual. Trevor had pushed the pressure higher investor demo coming up, metrics needed improvement, timelines shrinking. By 10 a.m., half the team already looked exhausted. Raymond didn't rush. He sat calmly, reviewing the last piece of his architecture diagram. He had finished the entire outline last night at home while listening to Coltrane. He began typing. His hands didn't move fast, nothing flashy, no frantic bursts, just steady, precise keystrokes, like a surgeon, like a craftsman. By noon, he had finished his entire module. He ran tests. 0 errors, 0 warnings, 0 inefficiencies. Then he optimized it further, then documented it in crystal clear detail. It wasn't just good, it was elegant. 2 young devs approached him timidly, eyes wide. Ray? One asked. We saw your branch. Did you already finish your part? Ray rotated his monitor so they could see the terminal. Yes, he said. And the pipeline runs clean. They stared. One whispered, holy crap. The other asked, can you show us how you did that? Ray nodded slowly. Course. When Trevor passed by 5 minutes later, he noticed the 2 devs at Raymond's desk. Learning from him. Listening. The smile vanished from his face. By midweek, cracks formed everywhere except around Raymond. He was calm. That calm made people curious. Curiosity turned into quiet respect. Developers who mocked him on Monday now lingered near his desk, pretending they just happened to walk by, glancing at his diagrams, trying to understand how someone his age worked so clearly. Ray helped them without showing any ego. He fixed their functions. He cleaned their queries. He reduced their memory usage. He solved bugs they thought were permanent. Little by little, their laughter turned into whispered praise. Somewhere around Thursday, a message appeared in the team's Slack. At Raymond is a machine. Holy *T. Reactions piled up. And on Friday morning, something happened that changed everything. Raymond pushed an update that increased the platform's processing speed by 27%. The CEO noticed. The CTO noticed. Even the investors noticed. Trevor noticed too, and his jaw tightened. Friday afternoon, conference room echo. Everyone gathered as the CTO, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, entered with a tablet in hand. All right, she said. Let's review the sprint results. Each developer presented their progress. Most had met 60 to 70% of their goals. Then it was Raymond's turn. Trevor tried to speak first. So, Ray here, let him speak. The CTO interrupted gently. Raymond walked to the screen, connected his laptop, and showed his module, his documentation, his optimization results, his diagrams, his bug fixes, his efficiency stats. The room was silent. Then the CTO's eyes narrowed on the screen. Raymond Harper, she murmured. Something like recognition flashed across her face. She looked up. You're not the same Raymond Harper who redesigned the Amazon freight engine in 2009, are you? Every head turned. Trevor froze. Raymond nodded quietly. Yes, that was me. A collective gasp filled the room. The CTO stood straighter. You built the original engine our entire logistics system depends on. Trevor stammered. Wait, you built that? Raymond simply said, you never asked. You've only asked me to keep up. By Monday morning, two things were true. Trevor was no longer team-led. And Raymond Harper, the man they mocked for carrying a briefcase, they doubted because of gray hair, who they underestimated because of age, was now senior engineering mentor, full-time, at 3 times the salary. The team didn't just respect him, they admired him. They learned from him. They depended on him, because they finally understood speed means nothing without direction, and experience is the map they didn't know they needed. Gerald hadn't expected silence to feel this heavy. It pressed against his ribs as he walked down the corridor toward the training floor, his badge still clipped crookedly to his shirt. The receptionist had stared at him earlier with an expression he couldn't fully read, half curiosity, half disbelief, yet she'd said nothing. No one really said anything here, not yet, but he could feel the unspoken judgments tightening in the air like old wires about to snap. His boots thudded softly with each step. The hallway smelled faintly of rubber, sweat, and industrial cleaner memories of every warehouse he had ever worked in rising like distant ghosts. Except this place wasn't a warehouse. It was a high-performance logistics hub disguised as a tech startup, where everything blinked, automated, streamed, and optimized, and where everyone apparently was half his age. As he entered the main training room, the fluorescent lights overhead brightened automatically, motion-activated, efficient, almost accusatory. Several heads turned. There they were. The team. 6 of them, maybe 7. He couldn't tell. They all blended together in a blur of youth, confidence, and thinly veiled cockiness. Hoodies, wireless earbuds, protein shakes, fast metabolisms, easy swagger. Sneakers that probably cost half a paycheck. Posture that suggested the world bent to them, not the other way around. Gerald swallowed. He'd known this moment would come. He'd known the recruiter's enthusiastic reassurances meant nothing the second he saw the team composition. He was the outlier, the anomaly, the unexpected variable in someone's spreadsheet, but he needed this job, and he wasn't about to let a few raised eyebrows scare him off. A tall guy with bleached hair nudged the shorter one beside him. Dude, that him? Has to be, the other whispered back loud enough for it to be intentional. No one else on today's list. Gerald pretended not to hear. A woman with a tablet stepped forward. She looked younger than his daughter. Hi, Mr. Reeves. Gerald nodded politely. Just Gerald is fine, right, Gerald? She tapped her screen. We're doing the physical efficiency assessment first. It's, pretty demanding. Her pause wasn't subtle. She was trying to soften the expectation, perhaps even offer him a way out without saying it outright. And she wasn't alone. The others weren't even pretending to hide their anticipation like they were getting front row seats to a show. A show where he failed. Gerald simply tightened the strap of his work glove. "I'll manage." The woman hesitated, then gestured toward a glowing blue walkway running the length of the training floor. Panels flickered beneath it. "This tracks your speed, accuracy, stride consistency, load balance," she explained. "And ego inflation?" Gerald murmured before he could stop himself. A few of the younger ones snickered. At least they had a sense of humor. "Ready whenever you are," she said. Gerald stepped onto the track. It hummed faintly beneath him, waking up, analyzing him, judging him. A soft chime. Performance metrics initiated. The voice was synthetic but crisp, like someone had programmed confidence into it. "First task," the woman said, "is a warm-up walk. Just keep your pace steady." Gerald nodded and began. His steps were even, controlled. Years of physical labor had gifted him endurance most 20-somethings didn't understand. But endurance wasn't flashy. It didn't look as impressive as speed. And the team wanted flashy. He could feel their eyes digging into his shoulders. "Wow," one whispered. "He's really slow. Bro, my smartwatch vibrates faster." "I give him 10 minutes before he taps out." Gerald kept walking. Left, right, left, his breathing steady, his arms relaxed. He wasn't here to win a sprint. He was here to outlast them. The system beeped again. Warm-up complete. Begin load run simulation. Load run. Now that he understood. The screen at the end of the room flickered to life. 5 crates materialized on the conveyor pathways, increasing, distances shifting, timing irregular. He heard someone behind him mutter, "Oh, he's dead." Another snorted, "Bet he can't even lift the 70-pounder. Gerald felt a spark flicker inside his chest, not anger exactly, but something close, something old, something forgotten. He stepped off the track and approached the first crate. A 40-pounder. Child's play. He lifted it with one hand. The room quieted. The next crate slid out 55 pounds. Grabbed it, adjusted his stance, and hoisted it cleanly. The murmur started. "Wait, what? No way." Maybe they gave him the easy setting, but they hadn't. The 70-pounder dropped onto the conveyor with a heavy thunk. Gerald rolled his shoulders. His back protested slightly, age leaving its signature, but he welcomed the ache. It was familiar. It felt honest. He crouched, positioned his hands, and lifted. Slowly. Controlled. Deliberate. He carried it across the room while the sensors tracked him, capturing every micro-movement. The younger workers watched with widening eyes. Then came the 85-pound crate. This was the one designed to separate high-potential hires from the rest, according to the job description. Gerald didn't hesitate. His knees bent. His grip tightened. And with a low exhale, he powered it upward. The room went silent, completely. Even the system seemed stunned. Matrix analysis, calibrating, recalibrating. A couple of the young men exchanged looks. "Dude, what the hell? That's not possible." He skipped like 3 micro-pauses. "He's stabilizing the load better than we do." Gerald carried the crate to its marker, set it down softly, and straightened, breathing heavier now, but still steady, still solid. The woman with the tablet blinked rapidly, checking her data. Okay. That was unexpected. She turned the screen toward herself like she doubted her own eyes. "Your balance score is actually extremely high." Someone in the back scoffed. "Nah, that's rigged." But their voices weren't as confident anymore. The facade of superiority had cracked. Gerald wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. "What's next?" The woman hesitated. "Stairs sprint with load transfer." "But maybe we should." "No need," he interrupted gently. "Let's continue." Confidence didn't radiate from him outwardly, not the way it did with the younger ones. His was quieter, born not from ego but experience. A lifetime of carrying more than just crates. A whistle blew. The sprint began. Gerald exploded forward, not fast, not flashy, but with grinding momentum. His muscles remembered, his bones remembered, his lungs burned, but they obeyed. Halfway up the staircase, a murmur rose behind him. He's keeping pace with Alex." "Dude, Alex literally runs triathlons." "No, look, he's gaining." Gerald reached the platform, grabbed the load, turned, descended with precision that seemed unnatural for someone his age. When his boots hit the floor again, a shockwave of disbelief spread behind him. The system beeped. Task complete. High efficiency score recorded. The young workers stared. For the first time, they weren't looking down at him. They were looking up. Gerald exhaled, chest rising and falling, sweat sliding down his temple. "Anything else?" he asked. Silence. Then finally one voice, almost involuntary. "What are you?" Gerald glanced toward the team. Someone who's had to keep up his whole life. Raymond walked into the kitchen area with his empty mug, hoping for at least one moment of normalcy, just coffee, nothing else. But even the kitchen wasn't neutral territory in this office. Two interns hovered near the cold brew tap, whispering about last night's product launch live stream like it was the Super Bowl. They quieted down when they saw him, not because they respected him, because they didn't know whether to laugh or pretend they hadn't said anything. The silence trailed him across the room. He filled his mug slowly, deliberately. He liked real coffee. Hot, bitter, simple. But the startup had replaced traditional coffee entirely with cold brew, as if heat was an outdated technology. He sighed and drank it anyway. One of the interns nudged the other, whispering just loudly enough, "Does he even know what Docker is?" The other stifled a snort. Raymond pretended not to hear. He had learned in those long years transitioning from mainframes to cloud infrastructure that responding to children rarely accomplished anything. He walked past them, steady and calm. But inside he felt the smallest sting. Not humiliation. He'd outgrown that decades ago. But something closer to disappointment. They were too young to understand the irony. The same tools they mocked him for not knowing existed because of the engineers they now dismissed. He returned to his desk, mug in hand, only to find Kyle leaning against it, arms folded, smirk loading. "Morning, Ray," Kyle said in a tone that meant the opposite. "Good morning," Raymond answered evenly. Kyle tapped his foot, pretending to check the time on his smartwatch. "Stand up in 3 minutes. And remember, keep it short. We run tight." Raymond nodded but held his gaze, a soft challenge. Kyle looked away first. 3 minutes later, the entire team gathered in a loose circle near the main wall where a giant digital Kanban board glowed with bright, colorful tasks. The board looked like a neon explosion, tickets everywhere, deadlines all red. Raymond noticed immediately. Their sprint planning was chaos. Nothing grouped by dependency, nothing sequenced in rational order. Everything urgent, nothing important. It made sense. He'd seen this pattern in dozens of failing teams. Ashley, another developer, whispered to a colleague while glancing at him, "This is going to be so painful. Bet he talks for 10 minutes. Raymond didn't react. Kyle clapped his hands. "Okay, people, fast as always. You know the rules. What you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and what's blocking you. 30 seconds each." The first few developers breezed through, rattling off jargon and updates that sounded like speedrun commentary. Then it was Raymond's turn. Kyle's eyebrows lifted. Everyone subtly leaned in. They expected something. Probably a ramble, probably outdated terminology, probably a mess. Raymond spoke clearly, calmly, professionally. "Yesterday, I reviewed the existing backend schema and traced all call paths from the legacy API gateway. Today, I'm rewriting the data access layer for the user service. You're going to see a 30 to 40% reduction in latency there. No blockers." The room blinked. Literally blinked. The kind of blink where people weren't expecting competence, much less mastery. Even Kyle's posture shifted, his smirk dimmed a little, replaced with uncertainty. Ashley tilted her head. "Wait, you traced everything yesterday?" Raymond nodded once. "Your documentation helped." Her cheeks pinkened at the compliment. But that's like hours of work. Not if you've done it many times," he said softly. Kyle forced a laugh. "All right, old school efficiency. Very cute. Moving on." But the tone had shifted subtly but unmistakably. After stand-up, Raymond returned to his desk and powered up his machine again. He had already finished 2/3 of the user service rewrite. He saw the mistakes. So many mistakes. The team had built the architecture like people stacking cardboard under a leaky roof. Temporary. Panicked. Full of shims and patches. He wasn't judging them. He knew what pressure did to teams like this. He also knew they needed something they didn't even realize they needed, a foundation. He typed quickly but thoughtfully, fingers moving with a precision honed across 4 decades. He wasn't fast the way the 20-year-olds were fast. His movements were exact, practiced, efficient. Every keystroke mattered. Halfway through a function, a notification popped up. "Slack, channel, #DevGeneral Kyle Team Lead. Raymond, need you in the war room. Now." Raymond sighed quietly. The war room was nothing more than a glass conference room where people yelled about problems they created themselves. He walked there slowly, coffee in hand. Inside, Kyle paced like a general whose battle plan had spontaneously combusted. "We have a problem," Kyle announced dramatically. "A serious problem." Raymond waited. Kyle pointed at the wall monitor where a giant error log scrolled endlessly. The data pipeline's failing. Again. And we're supposed to deploy in, he checked his watch, 48 hours. The investors want to see a demo. If we don't fix this, we're dead. Raymond read 2 lines of the error and already knew what was wrong. Kyle continued ranting, drawing diagrams, talking over everyone. You see, the pipeline is rejecting structured payloads from the ingestion service. Probably because of the new compression layer, but unless the compression is failing upstream. It's not, Raymond said gently. Kyle blinked. What? The compression isn't failing. Your ingestion service is sending malformed JSON. The pipeline is rejecting it because of a missing delimiter. Kyle bristled. No, we checked that already. That's not, Raymond pointed at the monitor. Line 432. The missing comma. The malformed object. The exact cause. Silence rippled through the room. An engineer from the other table whispered, Holy crap, he just spotted that in 2 seconds. Another muttered, That error took us all night. Kyle's ego tried to recover. Okay, fine. You found one issue. That doesn't fix the whole thing. No, Raymond replied. But it gets you 80% of the way. He walked to the keyboard slowly, respectfully, and typed a few commands. The log stopped scrolling. The error vanished. The service stabilized. A full minute of silence followed. Raymond stepped back, sipping his coffee calmly. Kyle cleared his throat. All right. Good catch. But everyone heard the undertone. This wasn't a catch. This was the kind of insight only someone who had built systems like this for decades could see instantly. Raymond didn't need praise. He only needed one thing. The space to do the work they had no idea how to do. But the real challenge, the one Kyle had set with a smirk and a snicker, was coming. And Raymond knew it. He could feel it hovering in the air like a storm gathering above the foggy San Francisco skyline. They were going to test him. They were going to push him. They were going to try to make him fail. Because nothing threatened insecure young men more than someone who had walked the road longer, steadier, and with more grace than they ever would. And Raymond Harper? He wasn't planning to just keep up. He was planning to lead them exactly where they didn't even know they needed to go. Raymond returned to his desk, aware of the looks following him. For the first time since he arrived, silence wasn't the sound of dismissal, it was the sound of recalculation. The kind of silence people make when the story they told themselves no longer fits the reality in front of them. He didn't revel in it. He didn't smirk. He didn't even let himself enjoy it. He simply sat down, set his mug next to his keyboard, and resumed typing. A notification pinged. Slack. DM from Ashley. That was impressive. Followed quickly by another. Slack. From Chris. You have respect. Didn't know you had back-end eyes like that. Back-end eyes. He almost laughed at that phrase. He typed short, polite responses, unwilling to let flattery distract him. But internally, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Not for glory. Not for proving himself. But for something far simpler: to do good work again. To build something the right way. At 11:15 a.m., the calendar invite popped up across everyone's screens. Back-end rebuild sprint mandatory. Kyle leading. Raymond recognized the tone immediately. This was the moment Kyle had been waiting for. A stage. An audience. A chance to assert dominance. Ray stood, stretched his back quietly. Because at his age, stretching was not optional. And walked to the glass conference room again. Everyone had gathered already. Laptops open. Energy drinks on the table. AirPods dangling from ears. The room buzzed with a kind of youthful electricity, confidence mixed with insecurity disguised as swagger. Kyle stood at the front, marker in hand, radiating self-importance. He gestured at the screen where a massive architecture diagram was projected. It was messy, over-engineered, slapped together with more enthusiasm than understanding. Raymond saw 3 circular dependencies instantly. He also saw the absence of proper horizontal scaling. And the worst part, a database schema that couldn't withstand even a minor load surge. Kyle cleared his throat dramatically. All right, team, we've got a huge project ahead of us. The investors want a live demo next week. We're going to rebuild the entire back end for speed. 1 week, 7 days, no exceptions. Someone muttered, Dude, that's insane. Someone else whispered, Impossible. Kyle smiled, soaking in the tension he created. Yes, impossible for most teams. But I think we can do it if everyone pulls their weight. Then, with a theatrical pause, he turned toward Raymond. And that includes you, Ray. Raymond didn't flinch. Of course, Kyle continued, pacing. Just being honest here, the pace might be a bit intense for someone with more traditional experience. A few laughs flickered around the room. Raymond remained still, hands folded in front of him, gazing at the diagram as if studying an old puzzle, not a threat. Kyle pushed harder. If you can keep up with US, great. If not, no hard feelings. But this is a startup. We need speed, youthful agility. People who can adapt on the fly. There it was. The not-so-subtle message. Raymond heard it all, processed it, and stored it in the back of his mind without letting it touch his expression. Kyle leaned on the table, hands spread wide, and delivered the line he had prepared. Raymond could practically hear the rehearsal in his voice. So, Ray, prove you can keep up with us. Silence, a heavy, dense silence. For a brief moment, the entire room tilted toward Raymond, eyes weighted, air tightened. Raymond looked at the board one more time. Not at Kyle, not at the kids waiting for a reaction, at the work itself. And then he spoke, not with defensiveness, not with bravado, but with the calm of someone who had built systems larger than their entire startup. I understand the challenge, he said softly, and I'll do my part. Kyle smirked. We'll see, Raymond nodded once. Internally, something deep within him, something that had stayed quiet for years, shifted. Not anger, not pride, focus. The same focused fire he had felt decades earlier when he was a young engineer racing against impossible deadlines, except now it burned slower, steadier, wiser. He looked around the room, at all the faces staring at him as if he were the odd piece on a new chessboard. Let them underestimate him. It only made the checkmate cleaner. At 12:30 p.m., the team scattered to grab lunch from nearby food trucks. Raymond stepped outside into the crisp San Francisco air. The streets buzzed with lunchtime energy Tesla employees in their logo jackets. Designers from Soma Studios, tech contractors carrying double-shot oat lattes with weary determination. This city had always been young, but it had never been this young. As he walked toward a small deli he liked, one that still sold hot coffee, bless them, he passed the wide glass windows of the startup's building. The reflection showed a man with a gray beard, a slow but steady stride, a soft posture hardened by years in rooms far more serious than the one inside. He paused for a second, looking at his reflection. He didn't feel 62. He felt seasoned. He felt like a man who had survived at least 3 major tech revolutions. He had adapted every time. Sometimes painfully, but he had adapted. People like Kyle, they thought age was a limitation. But for Raymond, age wasn't a chain, it was a library. He ordered a hot coffee and a simple turkey sandwich, sat at a tiny sidewalk table, and watched the city move around him. Every person rushing past reminded him of the younger engineers he'd mentored over the years. Brilliant, but always convinced they had to outrun life itself. Kyle was one of them. Just with less humility. Raymond sipped his coffee slowly. The challenge ahead was immense. The week would be brutal. The work would be exhausting. The team would test him, but he had studied the board. He had seen the flaws. He had mapped the path no one else could see. He wasn't planning to keep up with them. He was planning to lead. Quietly. Relentlessly. Precisely. He stood, threw away his cup, and walked back to the office. The week was about to start, and they had no idea what was coming. Monday morning arrived with a cold, sharp wind sweeping through Soma. The kind of wind that made the glass buildings hum faintly and pushed fog between the narrow streets like an uninvited guest. Raymond arrived 20 minutes early, stepping into the quiet, half-lit office while most of the team still slept off their weekend energy. The startup floor looked strangely peaceful at this hour. Empty beanbags, unused VR headsets, silent standing desks. For once, the walls weren't vibrating with Slack alerts or nervous keyboard clatter. Raymond breathed in the stillness, calm before the storm. He placed his leather briefcase beside his desk, hung his jacket on the back of his chair, and powered on his computer. While it booted up, he opened his notebook, a thick, time-worn moleskin with pages full of diagrams, arrows, sketches, calculations, and precise handwriting. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "Back-end rebuild, week plan Raymond Harper" underneath. He listed out tasks in tidy, methodical order. Map existing architecture, identify critical bottlenecks, redesign pipeline logic. Rewrite core modules, eliminate redundant calls, document for future scaling. He didn't need this list. He already knew it by heart. But writing it grounded him. It reminded him that good work wasn't about noise or speed or spectacle. It was about discipline. Footsteps echoed behind him. Someone had arrived. It was Ashley. She looked surprised to see him. "Ray, you're early," he smiled gently. Old habits. She sat at her desk across from him and lowered her voice. "You know Kyle's going to try and, Make today harder than it needs to be, right? I assumed as much, Raymond replied. She hesitated before whispering, just don't let him get in your head. He's good at that dot. Double quotes. Raymond tapped his pen on his notebook thoughtfully. I appreciate the warning, he said, but he's not the first insecure young leader I've worked under. Ashley exhaled, relieved someone finally said it out loud. Well, in that case, good luck. He nodded and returned to his notes. But luck wasn't what he needed. What he needed and what he had was experience. By 9:03 a.m., the office was loud again. Doors slammed. Cardboard coffee trays clattered onto desks. A dozen young engineers rushed in with hoodies, backpacks, and half-eaten breakfast burritos. Conversations overlapped. Dude, I was up till 4 playing Valorant. Why are we here so early? I swear if Kyle makes us work another weekend, Ray's already here. What time did he come in? Then came Kyle. AirPods in, designer hoodie, microdose calm confidence. He strolled through the office like a man walking onto a TED Talk stage. He clapped his hands loudly. Everyone to the bullpen, now. The energy changed instantly. Engineers scrambled toward the big central meeting area, whiteboards on every wall. Sticky notes everywhere, giant monitors hooked to bare-bones code repos. Kyle stood at the front, radiating the self-importance of someone who watched too many startup documentaries. Raymond joined the group quietly, notebook in hand. Kyle cleared his throat with unnecessary drama. All right, team. This week is a beast. Investors want a full back-end revamp for the demo. And we're going to deliver a wave of anxious murmurs. Kyle smiled as if feeding on it. We'll break into 3 sub-teams. Each handles a major system slice. But, he paused, eyes sliding toward Raymond. Some of us need a simpler task. The room froze. Everyone felt it. Everyone knew where this was going. Kyle pointed at the board. Group 1 API redesign. That's Chris, Maya, and Leo. Fist bumps all around. Group 2 data pipeline. That's Ashley, Brandon, and Talia. They nodded confidently. Group 3 legacy cleanup and documentation. Kyle looked at Raymond. Ray, that's you. Silence. That wasn't a task. That was a dismissal disguised as delegation. Raymond felt a familiar burn deep inside him, not of anger but recognition. He had seen this play before, dozens of times. Young leaders treating documentation like punishment. Legacy cleanup like exile. He looked up at Kyle with calm, steady eyes. Legacy cleanup and documentation, he repeated. Alone? Kyle shrugged. Yeah, I figured it'd be more in your wheelhouse. A few snickers around the room. Brandon muttered under his breath. Cold. Leo whispered, Dude, that's messed up. Kyle clapped his hands again. All right, let's dive in. The team split up, buzzing with energy. Raymond stood still for a moment. Then he approached the whiteboard where Kyle had written legacy cleanup in slanted, dismissive handwriting. He erased the words calmly. In their place, he wrote, System Stability Foundation Lead. Raymond Harper Ashley saw it from across the room. A slow smile spread across her face. Kyle saw it too. His jaw tightened. Back at his desk, Raymond opened the ancient modules Kyle had dumped on him. Some of them were written 5 years ago. Some 10. Some seemed to have been stitched together by 3 different interns during a caffeine shortage. The code was brittle, messy, uncommented, dependent on outdated libraries. But he wasn't overwhelmed. No, he was energized. This was where senior engineers shined, not in trendy frameworks or flashy languages, but in understanding the deep structural logic beneath everything. He adjusted his glasses, cracked his knuckles, and began reading the first file. Within 90 seconds, he had found the first flaw. Within 10 minutes, he had found 7. Within 30 minutes, he had drawn a full redesign with cleaner flow, safer calls, and a structure that would stop half the platform's random crashes. He felt his mind sharpening, slicing through complexity, returning to the level of mastery he hadn't exercised in years. Across the room, the young team struggled. Chris groaned loudly. Why the hell is this a PI root even here? Maya slammed her keyboard. The pipeline's calling itself recursively. Why? Kyle snapped. Can someone fix that circular dependency? Raymond already had. He kept working quietly. Ashley walked over with a hesitant voice. Ray, quick question. Raymond turned. Of course. She held out her laptop, embarrassed. How did you fix this legacy parser? I've been stuck on it for 2 hours. Raymond glanced at the screen and saw the issue immediately. He explained, gently, not to show off, not to belittle, but to teach. Ashley's eyes widened. That makes so much sense. Then Chris appeared behind her. Ray, can you take a look at something too? Only if it's no trouble. Ray smiled. Of course. 10 minutes later, Leo approached. Then Maya, then Brandon, then Talia. One by one, the young engineers came to him, not because they were forced to, but because competence attracts gravity. Experience draws respect the way fire draws cold hands. And slowly, subtly, Raymond Harper, the old guy, the legacy assignment, the trial contract, became the quiet center of the room. Even Kyle noticed, and he didn't like it. The office smelled different on Thursday morning. It wasn't a scent you'd easily describe. Not coffee, not printer ink, not the usual microwaved leftovers from last night's dinners. It was something else entirely. Momentum. The kind of momentum that made people sit up a little straighter in their chairs without knowing why. That made managers pull their phones from their pockets to check updates they suddenly felt nervous about. That made ambitious 20-somethings feel estranged. Unfamiliar pressure at the back of their necks. Like the wind was shifting and they might be standing in the wrong spot. And right in the middle of that invisible pressure change was Ray Carter, crisp shirt. Old leather briefcase, coffee in hand, eyes clear, steady, unbothered. He walked into Phoenix Dynamics that morning with the kind of unforced confidence only someone who'd survived 5 recessions. 2 market crashes, outsourcing waves, and 3 different generations of workplace culture could carry. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to be anything. He was just Ray. And that alone was enough to disrupt the entire building. When Ray stepped onto the 14th floor, he noticed something odd. No jokes today. No comments, no smirks. No, let's see if Grandpa can keep up today. Just a quiet tension, like the team had agreed silently to stop underestimating him. Not because they suddenly respected him, but because they suddenly feared him. Fear comes in many shapes. There was the fear of being outperformed, the fear of losing relevance, the fear that the man they had mocked on Monday might be the one rewriting the scoreboard by Friday. Ray didn't revel in it. He didn't even acknowledge it. He simply took his seat, turned on his monitor, opened his analysis dashboard, and started the day. 30 seconds later, he heard a soft voice beside him. It was Maya, the one junior analyst who never treated him with disrespect. A woman barely in her 20s, but already wise enough to see people beyond their resume timestamps. "Good morning, Ray," she whispered. "Everyone's watching you today." Ray smiled gently. "Then let's give them something worth watching." At 11 a.m. sharp, the department gathered in the glass conference room overlooking downtown Denver. A space normally filled with chatter and clacking keyboards had gone uncharacteristically still. On the screen, Ray's name. He was presenting his findings from the week's challenge, the same challenge the director had thrown at him with a smirk that first morning. "Prove you can keep up with us." As Ray set up his laptop, he could hear the breaths behind him, shallow, uneasy. When he began speaking, the transformation was immediate. He didn't talk like someone trying to show off. He talked like someone who had done this for decades through reorganizations, mergers, global expansions, chaotic leadership changes, and strategic pivots that would have crushed half the people in this room. He talked like a man who had held billion-dollar portfolios and knew where the hidden risks actually lived. He talked like someone who remembered when data wasn't stored in the cloud but in file cabinets taller than him. He talked with experience, with clarity, with the calm of a surgeon. And one by one, the people in the room leaned forward. Even Mark, the loudest skeptic, had stopped tapping his pen. Even the director, the man who issued the challenge, had folded his arms tightly, jaw tightening with every slide Ray advanced. Because Ray wasn't just keeping up, he was leading, and they all knew it. Then came the moment. Ray clicked to the final chart. A projection model. One he'd built from scratch, not just using company data, but cross-referencing market patterns, demographic trends, emerging consumer shifts, and supply chain volatility signals most of these analysts didn't even know about. When the chart expanded on the screen, the entire room froze. "This," Ray said softly, "is where we're headed if we don't intervene." Silence. Mark swallowed. Hard. The director blinked rapidly. Once. Twice. Maya's eyes widened. Because Ray hadn't just analyzed the data. He'd predicted the exact crisis the company was stumbling toward months before their forecasting systems even detected it. "How did you see that?" someone whispered from the back. Ray answered simply, "Because I've lived through this pattern before." The director cleared his throat. "Ray, who helped you with this?" It was meant to expose him. A subtle accusation, maybe he'd had outside assistance, used outdated methods, or found some shortcut. Ray turned to him calmly. "No one helped me." A few employees exchanged glances. Ray continued, This isn't my first recession cycle, or my second, or my third. Patterns repeat. Technology changes, but human decisions stay very much the same. He paused. And sometimes if you've survived enough storms, you can smell the next one before it hits. The room was dead silent. Ray clicked the remote, ending the presentation. Any questions? No one spoke. Not one. As the team left the conference room, whispers rippled like electricity. Did he really build all that alone? There's no way. He predicted the supply crisis before the dashboard even flagged it. He's not just keeping up. He's ahead of us. And then something unexpected happened. People started lining up near Ray's desk. Not to mock, not to challenge, but to ask. Ray, can you walk me through how you spotted that pattern? Ray, I'd love to understand your modeling technique. Ray, can I shadow you on your next project? Ray, can you teach me? For the first time all week, for the first time in years maybe, Ray felt something warm swell in his chest. Not pride, not validation, purpose. It had been a long time since anyone in a corporate building looked at him not as a relic, but as a mentor. At 4:45 p.m., as most of the team packed their bags, the director approached Ray quietly. Can I speak to you for a minute? Ray followed him into his office. The door closed. The director exhaled. Then he said the 7 words Ray never expected to hear. We may have underestimated you, Mr. Carter. Ray didn't respond. He didn't need to. The director continued. I'd like you to take the lead on the supply risk forecasting project. Ray blinked. Lead? He'd been at the company for 4 days. The director cleared his throat again. You've proven you can keep up. A pause. Based on this week, I think the team needs you more than you need them. Ray didn't celebrate when he got home that night. He didn't pour himself a drink. He didn't call an old friend to brag. He didn't post a proud update on LinkedIn like half the people at Phoenix Dynamics would have done the moment they got even a crumb of validation. No. He walked into his small Denver apartment, hung his old leather briefcase on the same hook he'd used for 22 years, loosened his tie, and sat at the worn wooden dinner table. The one he and his late wife, Elaine, had bought in 1991 from a garage sale. The one she'd insisted had character, even though the legs wobbled and one corner was chipped. The one where his kids had done homework, where birthdays had been celebrated, where bills had been paid, where family prayers had been whispered during hard years. This wasn't a table, it was a monument, and tonight Ray needed it. He sat there in silence, looking at the empty seat across from him, where Elaine had once sat. Hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, eyes soft, voice steady. Don't let them treat you like you're invisible, she used to tell him before job interviews. You're not old, Ray, you're seasoned. There's a difference. He could almost hear her saying it again. He closed his eyes. And then, quietly, almost reluctantly, he allowed himself to feel everything he had held back all week. Not triumph, not vindication, not pride, but something far quieter, far heavier. Relief. Relief that he wasn't done yet. Relief that someone finally recognized his value. Relief that after years of automated rejections, culture-fit excuses, ghosted interviews, and rooms full of people who looked at him like he was from another planet, he had finally found a place where his experience mattered again. He put his hands flat on the table. They were the hands of a 62-year-old man, wrinkled, tired, weathered, but they were also the hands that had worked 40 years without stopping, the hands that had carried his family, the hands that had repaired engines, typed reports, fixed broken faucets, held newborns, buried loved ones, and built a life brick by brick. The hands of a survivor. Ray inhaled slowly. He didn't cry, but his eyes burned in a way he hadn't felt in a long, long time. At 8:13 p.m., his phone buzzed. A number he recognized. His daughter, Emma. Dad, how was your day? Ray hesitated. He didn't know where to begin. It was good, he finally said. Emma laughed. You don't sound good. You sound like you're thinking about something. He smiled softly. She was always able to read him. There was a challenge at work this week. Oh? She sounded concerned. What kind of challenge? He chuckled. The kind where someone says, prove you can keep up with us. Emma's breath caught. Someone said that to you? Ray nodded, though she couldn't see it. Yeah. Silence. Then her voice shifted from casual to protective, the way her mother used to be. Dad, are they treating you right? Ray swallowed. For a second he thought about lying, about brushing it off, about pretending he didn't care. But Emma deserved the truth. They didn't take me seriously at first, he admitted. You know how it goes. Another quiet moment. Then Emma said with a tone that cracked slightly, I hate that. You've worked your whole life. You've built yourself from nothing. You were loyal to every company you ever stepped into. You trained people who moved up faster than you. You never took a sick day, you gave them everything. You don't deserve to start over at 62 being treated like a joke. Her voice didn't shake out of weakness, but out of anger. Anger for him. Anger at the world. I know, Ray said gently, calming her the way he used to when she was a little girl. But today was different. They saw what I could do. Emma exhaled, long and relieved. That's all I wanted to hear. After the phone call, Ray didn't feel lighter. He felt steadier because it wasn't just a workplace victory. It wasn't just proving he wasn't obsolete. It was remembering, truly remembering that he still had something powerful inside him. The ability to influence, to teach, to lead, to change outcomes. It had been a long time since he felt that fire. But now, it was back. And something inside him whispered, they challenged the wrong man. Just as he was preparing for bed, Ray checked his inbox. One new email from the director. Subject line, tomorrow, need to discuss leadership structure. Ray felt his pulse shift. Leadership structure? Him? He opened the email. Ray, I'd like to discuss your role moving forward. Please arrive at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Collins Ray stared at the screen. He wasn't stupid. This could mean several things, not all of them good. Maybe they wanted him as project lead. Maybe they wanted him as advisor. Maybe they wanted to place him in a mentorship position. Or maybe they wanted to stop him from overshadowing younger employees. He knew how corporate politics worked. Age discrimination didn't vanish overnight, and men like Collins didn't make sudden changes without a motive. But whatever tomorrow held, Ray was no longer afraid of it. He clicked off the lamp, and for the first time in years, he slept deeply. Not because the world felt safe again, but because he finally felt strong in it. Ray arrived at the Phoenix Dynamics office at 7:54 a.m., 6 minutes early, which for him was practically late. The San Francisco air was cold, fog curling around the glass towers downtown like slow-moving ghosts. The kind that matched the mood of a city where hundreds of careers rose and fell every day silently, without ceremony. He swiped his badge. The familiar soft beep welcomed him in. But something was different. The office was quiet. Too quiet. Startups were never quiet. Even at dawn, someone was usually bragging about a new commit, arguing on Slack, microwaving leftover ramen, or loudly telling a coworker why they were crushing it this week. But today, silence. Ray walked through the corridor, past the neon mission statement on the wall. Move fast. Break limits. Own the future. Young people took selfies in front of that sign. Ray always thought it sounded like a bumper sticker created by someone who'd never built anything that actually mattered. Today, though, he didn't linger on it. He pushed open the door to the glass conference room Collins always used. But the room was empty. No Collins, no slides, no team lead. Not even a note. Just emptiness, and a faint hum from the projector mounted on the ceiling. Ray frowned. He checked his watch. 7:59 a.m. He wasn't early anymore. He wasn't late either. He was exactly on time. So where was everyone? He sat down at the long table, placed his leather briefcase beside him, and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Ray wasn't annoyed. He had waited for worse in the corporate world, but something felt off. He reached for his phone to recheck the email when a voice suddenly spoke behind him. You're early. Ray turned. Collins, the director, stood in the doorway holding a coffee cup with the caution of a man who wasn't fully awake yet. But his expression was sharp. Sharper than usual. Ray stood. Good morning, sir. Collins waved this off. Sit. This won't be formal. That sentence alone told Ray more than any invitation ever could. Formal meant safe. Informal meant unpredictable. Ray sat. Collins took the seat across from him, not the head of the table, which he always chose, but right in front of Ray. Close. Direct. Intentional. He took a slow sip of coffee, then set the cup down. Ray, I'm going to be straightforward. Ray nodded. I need your help. Ray blinked. That wasn't what he expected. At all. Collins continued. This team is spiraling. They think they're fast, but they're disorganized. They think they're innovative, but they're careless. They think being young means being good. It doesn't. It just means they have energy. No direction. He leaned forward. You gave them direction this week, whether you intended to or not. Ray said nothing. Collins rubbed his eyes. I thought you were just a contract hire, a stopgap, someone to fill a seat until we could bring in more young blood. Ray smiled faintly. I'm familiar with that assumption. Collins winced, a subtle, embarrassed wince. Then, I read your entire background last night. Ray stiffened. His entire background? That wasn't normal. Not unless someone was trying to make a case for or against you. Collins stood, walked to the whiteboard, and uncapped a marker. Ray, you weren't just part of the Amazon freight engine redesign. He wrote on the board, Amazon fee, 2009 to Chief Systems Architect, NASA Drone Navigation Prototype, Lead Data Engineer. Hartford Security Network, Crisis Resilience Developer, DoD Logistics Contractor, Classified remained still. He didn't talk about his past work, especially not the DoD stuff. He believed in humility and in discretion. Collins capped the marker and turned around. You built systems entire industries depend on. You wrote frameworks my own college professors made us study. Ray cleared his throat. That was a long time ago. Collins shook his head. It wasn't your skills that impressed me. Ray raised an eyebrow. It was your discipline. He sat again. These kids have raw talent. They're fast, they're loud, they're passionate, but they don't have what you have. The resilience to work without ego. The ability to see problems before they happen. The habit of building things that last. Ray felt something shift in the room. Respect. Real respect. Not the shallow kind people show when they want something. Not the performative kind corporations use when HR needs better optics. This was different. Then Collins said the words that made Ray's heart pound. Not from fear, but from disbelief. Ray, I want you to lead them. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Impossible to misinterpret. Ray spoke carefully. In what capacity? Collins leaned back in his chair. As Senior Engineering Director, Ray froze. Director? He'd spent the last 6 years being rejected for jobs half that level. Ghosted by entry-level managers who weren't born when he wrote his first program. Dismissed by recruiters who assumed anyone over 50 couldn't keep up with software updates. Told he didn't fit team culture, startup energy, or modern workflow efficiency. Director? He swallowed. I was hired on a 90-day contract. Collins nodded. I'm converting you today. Ray blinked. That's unexpected. Collins smirked. It was unexpected for me too, frankly. I never thought I'd ask someone your age to take charge of a young team. Ray appreciated the honesty. Brutal honesty. The kind that stung, but the kind that mattered. Collins exhaled. But you proved something this week that none of them proved. Something I can't ignore. He looked Ray dead in the eye. You didn't keep up with them. A pause. You surpassed them. Ray didn't speak. He couldn't. Because for the first time in years, someone said out loud the thing he had always believed but never had the chance to show. He wasn't outdated. He wasn't obsolete. He wasn't past his prime. He was still in the fight. Then Collins said something quieter, something almost vulnerable. Ray, I'm not asking you to run the team because they need a boss, a beat. I'm asking because they need a man they can become. Ray left the conference room with a strange sensation in his chest, like something warm and heavy was pressing right under his sternum. Not pain, not discomfort. Something else. Recognition. He had almost forgotten what that felt like. The office was slowly coming alive now. Chairs rolling. Keyboards clacking. Members of the engineering team drifting in with hoodies, backpacks, and energy drinks the size of small rocket boosters. They had no idea what had just happened. No idea how much was about to change. Ray walked toward his desk, the one tucked in the corner, the quiet spot they gave him because it matched his vibe. He didn't mind. He had taken worse places in bigger companies than this one. But today he didn't sit. He stood there for a moment, fingers resting lightly on the back of his chair. He looked at the team, each face glowing in the blue light of dual monitors, the entire open floor buzzing with youth, caffeine, and misplaced confidence. He was going to lead them, not boss them around, not micromanage, but lead, the way his best mentors had led him decades ago. With clarity, calm, discipline, and the kind of experience you couldn't fake, no matter how many coding boot camps you attended. As he watched them, someone finally noticed him. Matt, the intern who had mocked his 90s workflow earlier in the week. Hey, Ray. Matt hesitated. His voice cracked. Morning. The kid looked nervous. Ray smiled warmly. Good morning, Matt. Matt nodded, relieved. Respect didn't come instantly. It grew slowly, like roots beneath concrete. Ray turned and began walking toward the kitchen for coffee when he heard a voice behind him. Dude, is he coming to the stand-up? That was Jared, the team lead. The one who made the challenge. The one who pretended to be a manager because he once got retweeted by a TechCrunch journalist. Another voice answered, well, yeah, he's still contract, right? Someone else chimed in, whispering, I heard he finished his module in like 2 days. No way, I'm telling you. The old dude is cracked. Ray didn't react. He just poured himself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and let their whispers drift into the background. because whispers were temporary. Results weren't. By 8:45 a.m., the whole engineering team gathered near the whiteboard wall for their daily stand-up. Usually loud, chaotic, and filled with unnecessary jokes. Not today. Today there was tension, a quiet curiosity, an unspoken question floating in the room. Why did Collins call Ray in so early? Jared leaned against the wall with the confidence of a man who still believed he ran the place. All right, everyone. Quick sync. Before we start, I want to address the challenge from last week. People smirked. Some elbowed each other. Jared scanned the room dramatically before landing his eyes on Ray. You know, Ray, you surprised us. I didn't think you'd... The door opened. Collins stepped in. The room froze. You could practically hear the hard drive spinning inside everyone's heads. Collins wasn't scheduled for stand-ups. He didn't pop in. Ever. He stood there in silence for a moment, hands behind his back, taking in the faces of the team. Then, good morning. A chorus of uncertain morning. Replies scattered across the group. Collins placed an iPad on the table, clasped his hands, and cleared his throat. I'll keep this brief. As of this morning, we have a new senior engineering director. Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. You could measure the shock in dropped jaws and widened eyes. Jared blinked twice. Slow, confused blinks. Wait, we're getting a new director? From where? Collins didn't look at him. He turned toward Ray and smiled. The kind of smile that told everyone exactly what was happening before he even said a word. He's already on the team. A ripple of reactions moved through the engineers, a mix of confusion, surprise, curiosity, and disbelief. Collins continued. Effective immediately, Raymond Harper will lead the engineering department. Gasps. A dropped pen. Someone actually whispered, Holy sh... Jared stared at Ray like he had just watched his reflection disappear from a mirror. No way. Collins didn't even acknowledge Jared's tiny implosion. He kept speaking. This is not a symbolic decision. This is not a temporary assignment. This is a leadership appointment based on performance, discipline, and demonstrated excellence. Then the killer line. And Ray didn't just keep up with you last week. A beat. He outperformed every person in this room. Someone choked on their kombucha. Ray stayed still. Not smug, not proud, just composed. Because dignity aged well. Ego didn't. Collins stepped aside, giving the floor to Ray. Raymond, the team is yours. Ray felt every eye land on him. Every young face searching him with a new expression. Not amusement, not doubt, not dismissal. Something closer to awe. And fear. And realization. He inhaled slowly. Then he spoke with the calm authority of a man who had weathered storms these kids hadn't even imagined. Thank you, Collins. Ray looked at the team. If I'm going to lead you, you need to know one thing. The room leaned in. I'm not here to replace your ideas. His voice deepened. I'm here to elevate them. A quiet gasp. Ray walked closer. I'm not competing with you. He paused. I'm investing in you. Two interns exchanged looks. A senior dev swallowed hard. Even Jared straightened up, fear slowly replacing ego. Ray continued, if you follow hype, you'll move fast. He tapped his chest. But if you follow knowledge, you'll move far. Silence. Powerful, electric silence. Then Ray nodded once. Now, let's get to work. The moment Ray finished speaking, the room didn't move. Not a breath. Not a whisper. Not a keyboard click. It was the kind of silence that comes only after something big shifts. Something no one can fully process yet. The young team stared at him as if they were seeing him for the first time, and in a way they were. Respect has a sound, and it filled the room like oxygen. Ray stepped forward and uncapped a marker. The whiteboard was smeared with half-erased notes, fragments of ideas, and scribbles left by people who rushed instead of thinking. He wiped the board clean with one smooth stroke of the eraser, a symbolic reset, a blank slate. He turned back to the team. All right, Ray said, tapping the board. Let's talk about last week's sprint. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Last week's sprint had been a disaster wrapped in chaos, sprinkled with ego and delivered at the speed of caffeine-fueled panic. Ray didn't shame them, didn't belittle them, didn't play the power card. He simply started with, what did we learn? The question landed with unexpected weight. For the first time, no one laughed, no one whispered, no one rolled their eyes. It was Matt, the intern, who finally raised a hesitant hand. Matt, the same kid who mocked him about the 90s workflow. Ray nodded. Go ahead. We rushed everything, Matt admitted. We kept trying to fix issues with more code instead of fixing the design. Ray smiled softly. Exactly, he wrote on the board. 1. Rushing creates work. 2. Planning prevents it. Another engineer spoke up, a quiet girl named Teresa who never talked much during stand-ups. Ray, how did you finish your module so fast? Ray turned toward her, not with superiority, but with sincerity. I spent the first day understanding the problem, he replied, not solving it. A low murmur moved through the group. Ray wrote again. 3. Speed is a byproduct of clarity. Then he capped the marker and stepped back. This week, he said, we're not chasing speed. We're chasing understanding. Jared, the former team lead, finally broke his silence. His voice was stiff, defensive. Well, clarity is great and all, but we have deadlines. The CTO wants the beta ready in 4 weeks. Ray nodded calmly. And we'll deliver it in 4. Jared frowned. You're saying that like it's easy. No, Ray said. I'm saying it like it's possible. For the first time in a long while, Jared had no quick comeback. Ray walked toward his laptop. Before we start dividing tasks, he said, I want to review your code from last week, not to judge, to understand how you think. That was the moment the room changed. The arrogance faded. The tension shifted. Faces softened. These weren't kids who hated him. They were kids who had never been led. Ray sat at the front table and projected the repository onto the large monitor. The code filled the screen, messy in places, brilliant in others, rushed everywhere. He scrolled through each file, narrating as he went. Good intuition here. This logic isn't wrong, it's just unpolished. This solution is creative. Unstable, but creative. Every note came with calm explanation. Every critique came with a lesson. Every flaw came with a fix. There was no shame, no arrogance, no superiority, just mentorship, real mentorship. When he reached Matt's section, the intern stiffened. I know it's rough, Matt muttered. Ray turned his head. Matt, your approach was solid, but you solved the wrong problem. Matt blinked. What do you mean? Ray pointed to the screen. You coded what you thought the system needed, not what the system actually required. He wrote on the board. 4. Don't assume. Inspect. Matt nodded slowly, absorbing it like gospel. Next was Teresa's part. Her code was elegant, unnecessarily complex, but elegant. Ray smiled. You have a good mind for architecture, he said. Teresa's eyes widened. Really? Yes. But you're optimizing for elegance before reliability. Beauty is good. After it works. The team laughed, not mocking, but relieved. Ray continued the review for an hour. They listened. They asked questions. They learned. It felt less like a meeting and more like a masterclass they didn't know they were craving. When the review finally ended, Ray clapped his hands once. All right, time to build something better. Instead of handing out tasks randomly or pushing them onto whoever looked available, Ray used a method they had never seen. He walked around the room talking to each engineer individually. What part of the system do you enjoy the most? What's your strongest skill? What area do you want to grow in? What scares you a little but excites you too? The team looked stunned. No manager had ever asked them these questions. Ray wasn't just assigning tasks. He was building people. When he finished the circuit, he returned to the front and announced the assignments, each one perfectly aligned with strengths, weaknesses, and growth. The team murmured with surprise. How did you figure all that out? Someone asked. Ray smiled. I listened. Finally, Ray approached Jared. The room fell strangely quiet. Jared's jaw tightened, prepared for humiliation. Ray looked him in the eye. I'm giving you the API gateway. Jared blinked. That's the hardest module. Yes, Ray replied. And you're capable of it. Jared's face cracked, just slightly, showing the shock behind his ego. You think I can handle it? Ray nodded. You're talented, Jared. You just confuse confidence with speed. The team watched in awe as Jared's shoulders loosened. His breath steadied, and maybe for the first time, his posture showed humility instead of arrogance. Thank you, Jared whispered. Ray patted his shoulder. Let's build something we're proud of. When everyone sat back down to work, something happened that Collins couldn't have manufactured, Jared couldn't have forced, and the company had never seen unity, not because of a leader who demanded obedience, but because of a leader who inspired contribution. Ray sat at his desk, finally, and took out his leather briefcase as if it were the start of any other day. He opened his notebook, real paper, lined, slightly yellowed at the edges, and wrote, Day 1, they're ready. They just needed direction, he smiled faintly. The week had barely begun, and already he could feel the shift. This team wasn't just keeping up with him, they were rising. Raymond arrived early the next morning, earlier than usual. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because today was different. Today the real storm was coming. The company had scheduled an all-hands meeting with the executive team to review project status, performance metrics, and team efficiency. And thanks to Raymond's quiet work, the dashboards looked very different than they did 7 days ago. Something else was different too. The whispers stopped. Before, people whispered, "Is he too slow? Why did they hire him? Bro, he prints documents like actually prints them." Now, they whispered, "Did he fix the pipeline issue alone? Wait, is it true he rebuilt the catching layer from scratch? Dude, he solved the bug we've had for months." Their tone wasn't mocking anymore. It was mixed with a little bit of fear. But Raymond didn't bask in the attention. He didn't smirk. He didn't walk any differently. He simply poured himself a cup of plain black coffee, the only thing in the office not infused with lavender, CBD, or whatever $15 artisan nonsense the startup trendsetters liked. He found his desk, sat down, and went to work. One of the junior devs, Owen, hovered awkwardly beside him. Ray? Do you have a sec?" Ray looked up, warm and patient. "Of course." Owen twisted his hoodie string nervously. "So, I looked at the module you refactored. I didn't even know you could streamline a database call that way. We never learned that." Ray smiled. "That's because you're learning speed. I learned consequences." Owen blinked. "I don't think I understand." Ray set his coffee down. "In your generation, everything is about how fast you can ship. In mine, everything was about how badly things break if you ship garbage." Owen laughed under his breath because he knew it was true. Ray leaned in, whispering like he was sharing a trade secret. "There's a big difference between being fast and being reckless." Owen nodded, absorbing every word. Before he could respond, the team lead Jack walked in. But today he didn't swagger, didn't spin in his chair. He didn't toss his hydro flask onto the desk like a movie villain. He walked in stiffly, quiet, cautious, almost intimidated. He avoided looking directly at Raymond, which didn't go unnoticed. The developers exchanged glances. The dynamic had shifted, completely. When Jack finally spoke, it was to the whole room. "All right, team. The executives want us in the West Conference Room in 20. Bring your laptops. And, good job this week. It was the weakest, most fragile good job anyone had ever heard, and every dev in the room had to bite their lip to avoid laughing." Raymond simply nodded, unfazed. But inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Vindication. Not for being right, not for outperforming the team, but because the work, the craft still meant something. And someone had finally noticed. Maybe today the rest of the company would too. He closed his binder, picked up his old leather briefcase, the one everyone used to mock, and walked toward the conference room. For the first time since joining the company, people followed behind him instead of walking ahead. The West Conference Room was the largest one in the building. Glass walls, a 20-foot polished oak table, LED light panels that made everyone look 2 shades paler, and a massive digital screen that displayed the company logo like it was a commandment. Raymond stepped in quietly, choosing a seat near the center of the table. Not at the head. He never believed in hierarchy as a performance booster. He believed in clarity. The rest of the team filed in, whispering, exchanging nervous glances. The room felt heavier than usual. Everyone knew this meeting wasn't routine. Then the executives entered. First came Elise, the CTO, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Then Dominic the coup, carrying his tablet like it was fused to his hand. And finally, Lauren Bennett, the founder and CEO himself, a man who wore Allbirds, Patagonia, and a permanent expression of being 5 seconds away from a nervous breakdown. Jack straightened instantly, posture stiff, smile strained. He looked like a kid caught writing a bad word on the chalkboard. Elise began. "Good morning, everyone. We've reviewed your sprint output for the week, and we need to address the dramatic changes in productivity and infrastructure stability." Her tone was neutral. Too neutral. The team swallowed collectively. She tapped the screen. The dashboard appeared. Color-coded, crisp, and horrifyingly honest, plus 27% improvement in system performance, 46% reduction in critical errors, 0 back-end crashes for the first time in 11 weeks, documentation completeness, 100% the developers shifted. Shocked even though they lived it. Elisa's eyes moved across the room. These improvements were not expected, nor were they requested at this scale. "We'd like to know how they happened." Jack cleared his throat. Well, the team really pushed themselves this week. A lot of late nights, a lot of hustle. I've been coaching them aggressively, and Elise raised a hand. A single calm gesture, and Jack shut up instantly. We reviewed the commit history, she said, and the server logs, and the infrastructure notes. Slide after slide flipped on the screen. Every improvement, every fix, every rewritten component, every optimization, all labeled with the same commit signature, our Harper silence, except for the soft hum of the projector. Elise looked directly at Raymond. Mr. Harper, she said, could you explain your process this week? Raymond didn't grandstand. He didn't monologue. He didn't pretend to be humble or inflate himself. He answered plainly, I didn't rush. I just removed the things that were slowing everyone else down. The room reacted like he had cast a spell. Even the executives paused. Ray continued, you have a talented team. They think fast. They act fast. But the system they inherited was inefficient. No amount of speed can compensate for a flawed foundation. Dominic the Coup leaned forward. So you rebuilt the foundation. In a week? No, Raymond said politely. I just fixed the parts that were screaming the loudest. Then he added, and I documented it for them, because no one should feel lost in a system they didn't break. The developers looked down at the table, some in shame, some in admiration, some in a mixture of both. But the executives? They were staring at Raymond like they'd just discovered a diamond under a pile of fidget spinners. Jack shifted nervously. Elise addressed him without turning. Jack, why wasn't Mr. Harper assigned a senior advisory role? Jack froze. His Adam's apple bobbed. He was brought on as a contractor, and on your recommendation, Elise reminded him. The temperature in the room plummeted. Jack felt it. Everybody felt it. Raymond stepped in gently. I don't blame Jack, he said. I understand I may not look like the typical hire for this environment. Elise raised an eyebrow. Ray continued, but age isn't a liability. It's cached experience. If you never access it, you're wasting it. The room remained silent for a good 5 seconds, the expensive kind of silence where decisions are being made. Finally, Elise spoke. Mr. Harper, would you stay for a moment after the meeting? Jack's face drained of color. The rest of the team? They already sensed where this was going, and so did Raymond. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat. He simply nodded. Because this moment wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving something to himself, that he still belonged in the world he helped build. The meeting ended with the usual shuffle of laptops closing, chairs scraping, and half-whispered conversations about what the executives were planning next. But no one left the room with Jack. He lingered by the glass wall, pale, pretending to scroll through his phone. Everyone else seemed to gravitate toward Raymond, not close enough to overwhelm him, but near enough to show something had changed. Respect. Real, earned respect. Owen paused on his way out, offering a small smile. Ray, you killed it this week. Ray nodded. Team effort. Owen shook his head gently. No, not this time. Then he left, leaving Raymond alone at the table as the executives waited just outside the glass entry. Elise gestured politely. Mr. Harper, would you join us? Ray stood, adjusting the strap of his old leather briefcase. The one everyone used to joke belonged in a museum. Now it looked like part of a legend. He stepped into the smaller executive room, a minimalist space with tall windows and a panoramic view of downtown Seattle. Mount Rainier sat on the horizon like a quiet witness. Lauren Bennett, the CEO, spoke first. We've reviewed your history, Mr. Harper. Ray stayed still, listening. You never mentioned that you were the principal systems architect for the Amazon freight engine. Ray shrugged lightly. It felt irrelevant. You asked me to keep up, not give a biography. Dominic huffed a small laugh. Elise smiled. Respectfully, she said, that was a significant understatement. There was a pause. One of those heavy, decision-making pauses that changes the direction of a life. Then Lauren stepped forward. Raymond, you've done more in 7 days than some teams do in 7 months. You not only improved the system, you recalibrated the entire culture without ever raising your voice. Ray swallowed, not out of nerves, but because for the first time in a long time, someone was seeing him clearly. Lauren continued, we want to offer you a full-time position, not as a contractor, not as a developer. Ray waited. We want you as our senior engineering mentor, a role built around you, your experience, your leadership, your process. He paused. And your salary would reflect that. 3 times your contract rate. Ray blinked. He wasn't a man who showed emotion easily, not at work, not in high-stakes rooms like this. But for the first time in decades, he felt something loosen in his chest. Recognition, validation, belonging. He nodded slowly. I'd be honored. The executives exchanged encouraging glances. But Elise wasn't finished. There's one more thing, she said. Ray looked up. We're restructuring the back-end team leadership. Given recent performance issues, Jack's name wasn't spoken, but it didn't have to be. Ray nodded again, neutral, respectful. I won't get involved in that decision, he said. It's not my place. Elise answered softly. It's already decided. Ray didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. Because this was never about revenge. It was about dignity. Cut 2. Later that day, Ray returned to the open office floor. Heads turned. People straightened in their chairs. A few smiled nervously like kids caught. Misbehaving in front of a substitute teacher who turned out to be a Navy SEAL. Jack stood by his desk, packing a single box. He didn't look up. Ray stopped beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jack muttered, bitter and cracked, "How did you do it?" Ray answered gently, "I didn't do anything to you, Jack. You did it to yourself." Jack looked up, eyes tired. "You made me look stupid." Ray shook his head. "No, I made the mistakes visible. You made them." Jack swallowed and went back to packing. Ray walked on, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. Because humility is what separates those who last from those who burn out trying to look like they belong. Ray sat at his desk again, not in the corner, not isolated, but part of the flow of the team. Owen approached first, then Mia, then Dante. One by one, the younger devs gathered around him. "Ray," Mia asked shyly, "could you maybe teach us how you optimize queries like that?" Another chimed in. "Yeah, and the concurrency fixes you did. I've never seen anything that clean." Ray closed his notebook, smiled. "Of course. Let's start today." Because this is what he was meant to do. Not prove he could keep up, but teach others how to stop tripping over shortcuts. Outside, Seattle rain began tapping softly against the windows, a quiet applause only he could hear. Age is not a limitation. It is an advantage disguised as patience. An armor forged from mistakes others haven't lived long enough to make. An experience? It doesn't slow you down, teaches you where to step,